Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing. I'm Brian Calley, CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Miller, Vice President of Marketing and Strategic Communications. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to our sponsor, Consumers Credit Union, for your support of the show. So, Brian, you've had a kind of a busy week putting a few miles on the car. Why don't you fill our viewers in on your current whereabouts?
So I happen to be at the moment in Marquette. We've got a couple of events this evening and tomorrow morning here, but have been across the UP all the way to the western edge, literally the border of Wisconsin. So all the way over in Ironwood. Spent some time in Ontonagon, also Houghton, even made it to Calumet. So covered a lot of ground now, and then Lance, Baraga County, and now in Marquette. So we have covered a lot of ground. We have tons of members in the UP. The UP small businesses dominate the landscape, and so we like to be on the ground and present multiple times a year, not just through a screen like this. You know, we appreciate all the remote opportunities, but to be physically present with people. One of the things that we decided to do this year is to have roundtable discussions with business owners located on border communities, and that's why we went to Ironwood, hosted by Stormy Cromer, some local business community from there in Ironwood, and right across the river in Hurley, which is Wisconsin. It's essentially one community that straddles two states, and so we talked to the business owners there about the struggles of having a business on one side of the border when it seems like things in the Wisconsin side, getting up and running, getting permits, getting inspections, getting just outcomes, and the ability to move forward when things change, or you're looking to expand or looking to start a new business, that it just goes a lot faster on the Wisconsin side. It's one thing just to say those words, but we really had an in-depth discussion with business owners there about exactly the things that are slower and frustrating and more difficult. And our goal over the course of the next few months, as we do this on our borders, these border conversations that we have on the borders with Indiana and Ohio and Wisconsin, to really get a sense for what the issues are, and then build out a border community agenda for small businesses that we take into state government to hopefully make some changes and ensure that those that happen to be in very close proximity to a different state with a completely different set of rules and laws and regulatory agencies, that the Michigan side is not at a disadvantage to those that happen to operate in another jurisdiction. Also paying attention to issues with respect to employees. When you're drawing employees from both sides of the community or the border, what that really means for compliance and unemployment and remittance of taxes, income taxes and so forth. All of these issues, really want to get down to the nitty-gritty of what those communities and what small businesses in those communities need to be successful.
All right, and you may be out meeting with a lot of members and small business owners, but there are still some important pieces of legislation that I know you've been tracking from up north. So let's start with the issue of preemption, one that we talked a little bit about Monday and also issued a call to action on. What's the latest?
Yeah, first of all, thank you everybody who answered our call to action, reached out to your senator. This was really aimed at the Senate because this issue was passed out of Senate committee. It's on the Senate floor. At the moment, it looks to be stalled on the Senate floor, which we're pretty happy about, and we know that our members had a lot to do with. And we've worked with other business organizations as well in trying to make sure that there's consistent and strong messaging that this is the wrong way to go. It's the idea of having instead of having a uniform set of minimum wage and labor regulations statewide, that the state rules would become minimums, and then local communities would have an additional layer, if you will, of rules on top of the state rules. Right now, there's preemption against that. Local communities can't have their own minimum wage that's higher than the state minimum wage, for example. So there's an effort to repeal that, and it looked like it was really being made a priority, at least to move through the Senate. And when we saw it pop out of committee in really short order, without a lot of discussion, debate, and vetting, and we organized quickly to try to push back on that. And it does appear to be stalled on the floor for now. So we're feeling pretty good that that one is not imminent, that there's nothing imminent that is going to happen, make a big difference for just our small business owners that really can't afford to keep track of up to 1,800 different local governments and different sets of rules and standards across all of those jurisdictions.
All right, let's talk next about the energy proposal. This was 100% renewable energy portfolio proposal. So how is that looking right now?
The Energy Committee, leadership, the chair of the Energy Committee and sponsors of the legislation have been negotiating kind of behind the scenes to try to come up with enough support, critical support to move it through the Senate, out of committee, onto the floor, and then out of the Senate before they close up for the year, which we believe is going to be after the first week in November. So here's the thing, though. They didn't hold a committee hearing this week like last week we thought they were going to. And that's an indication that they're struggling to come up with a consensus or a critical mass of support to move the legislation forward. This is one that we were concerned about, the idea of going to a 100% renewable portfolio or 100% carbon-free standard with a date certain when that has to happen, without any sort of protections for reliability and cost that our members would have to pay for their energy and electricity. Also concerned about the move toward elimination of natural gas, which isn't just used for electricity, but also for heating in many places around the state. So especially in rural areas. So that is this is a really important policy issue that we think deserves more time, more vetting, more engagement than what it originally was getting here, as it seemed to be kind of fast-tracked, again, at least to get it through and out of the Senate. The fact that there wasn't a hearing this week, it does look like they're struggling to get to that critical mass, which is fine, even for those who are really, really focused on issues of lowering carbon emissions. You can take heart and be proud of Michigan and how far it has come in terms of its carbon footprint with our utility companies. It's been huge improvements over the last 10 years, and more that is coming in the future. I mean, they're just moving so quickly in this direction. It's just the concern is trying to get, instead of going from carbon neutral to go to carbon free. It's just so expensive and so difficult to get to go to literally zero that we just really want to see it laid out explicitly how our members, small businesses, will be protected from rate increases and reliability problems by trying to get to this when the technology is simply not available yet, in order to do so with the protections that we're looking for.
All right, last on our list, for now anyway, is the paid leave mandates. Any movement there?
Yeah, this is one where there was a proposal that was introduced in the spring, and it was kind of just sitting there for a while, but then it got kind of moved up to the top of the Senate's agenda when the governor supported it in a speech in late August. So this has moved it up on our list of concerns as well, the fact that there's this push behind it. But they have not held committee hearings on it or testimony. I think they are having some difficulty in drumming up support, because while the concept of mandatory family medical leave benefits is something that maybe there are plenty of lawmakers, policymakers that would like to see something happen. The idea of, again, without any real kind of hearing or engagement process, especially with employers, the idea of doing a one-size-fits-all across the board for every business with one or more employees, mandatory 15-week benefit, 15 weeks per year, that do not be taken consecutively, could be taken intermixed throughout the year, in an unemployment trust fund style new payroll tax, like that's a massive change to do without an extraordinary amount of, I think would deserve and require an extraordinary amount of engagement with stakeholders. So they also appear to be struggling to move that one forward. Again, that's good news that it should be hard to pass something like that, because 80% of our members opposed it, 8% support it. The others undecided, literally 10 to 1 against. 90% of our members in our last survey said that it would be extremely detrimental to their business. This is something that really deserves to be well vetted and to go in with eyes wide open of what, and we're hoping that business owners will listen to what our members, small business owners, are saying, that this would be a very difficult thing that would hurt their prospects in the future. And by the way, there's plenty of warning signs in our most recent quarterly survey that we just put out. Check out our website, and you can see all those outcomes. We talked a little bit about those in a previous briefing, but business owners are less confident in the long-term prospects or survival of their business today than they were a year ago, and it's not an insignificant change. Also, business owners are starting to take real actions to prepare for a recession or recession conditions. These are different. It wasn't a year ago when there's talk of a possible recession, you didn't see like real actions, delay capital expenditures, hiring freeze, reducing expenses across the board. Those types of actions you didn't see taken as much before, but now that we're kind of on the cusp, or it feels like we're on the cusp of a softer economic time, perhaps a recession, that makes the context of these changes that make things more expensive to operate a business that much more difficult for our members to swallow. So this was overall, we consider this to be a pretty good week in that nothing happened. So we like it when the legislature doesn't do much. And so this week, while they are still pushing, they're still working to try to find a pathway for some of these things to pass. Every week that we can get by without the business environment for small businesses getting worse is a win, and we're just hopeful that we can just hold the status quo throughout the rest of this fall. And if we can get through their recess, which will come earlier this year because of that presidential primary issue that we've talked about before, we're feeling pretty good that the rest of the term, that while some things will change, probably some things will happen that we won't like, but the overall, the size and scope and amount of things that could happen, I think, diminishes each day.
All right, now let's talk about a newer issue. It just passed out of the Tax Policy Committee, and this one concerns the city of Detroit.
Yeah, the city of Detroit has made a proposal, and the proposal is to change the way that property taxes work in the city. And it's like an opt-in proposal. Now, the city of Detroit has an issue, and it was introduced, by the way, originally as being something that any city or any jurisdiction can opt into, and then it could be approved by voters because it's a big change. It would require voter approval. In each city, same way like city income tax requires voter approval. So city council has to pass it, then the voters have to approve it. Detroit's proposing a change in property taxes that would go through that same type of process. City council would have to approve it, then the citizens of the city would have to ratify it in a public vote, a referendum. What they're trying to do here is to shift property tax burden away from developed property and more onto land. So they would increase the tax rate on land and the portion of property that is land, and then lower it on the improvements. So like lower it on the house and the fixtures and any other improvements to a property. So they would take property tax millages, increase it on the land to do this. It's because in lots of land that is being held by speculators, and the city would like to make it for speculators to just sit on rotting properties for a longer period. They would rather increment of those properties. Detroit, the overall and what the impact would have on small businesses would see a net tax cut with it. Businesses have properties that have improvement. The assessment, the tax rate, if you have just land and you're just sitting, and that's about 3% of. So the tax policy, like it's a new concept, and people that said, well, Detroit wouldn't be very relevant for other cities. It was like narrow it so it's just an option, and then see how it goes for them, and then out of committee. They narrowed it down so population of over 500,000, and so yes, ultimately for a city never want to do this, so they would never opt in. So it's kind of an irrelevant issue for Grand Rapids. That is because there's not a bunch of vacant land in Grand. For the city of Grand Rapids, it would, because this trade on the improvements in property, increase it on, they would never opt in. So kind of Detroit centric to start with here. So it's a tool that is of the Speaker of the House, and one that I think has a really good chance of making it. That was developed by, or at least the Detroit's mayor presented it at the policy conference in Mackinac, Detroit Regional Chamber of Commerce, made it for Detroit. So bumpy road for a little while there on the floor. I will be very surprised next week or the.
Okay, let's revisit the we had visits from week. What's the latest?
Yeah, that's President Biden line and spent I think I read an article, little speech, and I believe that this is the first time the president has visited, the president of the United States, sitting a picket line. I had mentioned before, it looks like it's the first time it's ever happened. The pretty big step. He went pay increases at the reminder 46% is what it works. The contract is being negotiated right now. So contrast compared to when he strike before, where prevention and really seemed to kind of agreement. In this case, kind of publicly leaning on the. But what's interesting for Biden's reelection, and so he's kind of still like auditioning for that endorsement. Well, Trump comes to Michigan. He's in Macomb County. Out there that and some pretty sharp words for the move vehicles and in the automotive industry, and strike a chord because there's no question electrification will mean less for people in the automotive industry capitalize on and this period of time. W will endorse Joe Biden, I think, that deal. And any real breakthroughs. The cost of living adjustment seemed to really them in a good additional slowdowns and walkouts. Stellantis and strikes for parts distribution centers. Ford did not. You never know what's going on behind the scenes, but I haven't breakthroughs and sort of breakthroughs by tomorrow. Strike would expand even further. At this point, strike starting as soon as.
All right. Get covered on Monday. Let's talk about some areas that.
Yeah, so this is that is, so we talked about this before, talked about the federal house in order, the fault on debt payments. Talking about is appropriations for the operation. And so it's, while it is different, it's dramatic as all. Kind of cover. The first was the Postal Service is not, it's its own agency, and income, it runs its operation, some support from the federal government. So when federal agencies, that will happen, that federal parks, for example, would, the US Postal Service won't close down. You'll still get mail. Areas that you might find is Social Security. So Social Security, and if you're in the healthcare business, payments in, both of those will continue, or are in a classification, regular government operations there, and those security payments for security card issuance. So if you card, maybe there's a birth or married and you change your name and that sort of thing during the shutdown. I've seen some mixed signals here. And you need to enroll for the enroll a new person, that you're seeing people that Medicare, that should be fine to continue billing interrupted. Passports was the other. With passports, it will be shut off. A passport, or you want to you won't. They're just avoided, but during this time period, that there are like emergency features, whether or not those, I don't know for sure on that. Passport processing will pause until until it's resolved and resume. Now, I think if you got a problem with the federal government, you're not like in DC. You're probably going to call your most members of Congress have kind of arranged with their employees that they continue working when they come back. So they just, people, there's a good chance that you're congressional so that they could take your call, choose, but I might be most concerned about, especially U.S. for people in business, U.S. entity from the rest of the federal government, not likely to see any kind of disruption at all.
Right. I guess we'll find out in the next couple of come to fruition or not. So the Ford project, she approved an addition to this project, even though right now it's. What do you make of this?
It was kind of an interesting, is this dramatic? We're pausing this, or or not fully, it can proceed, and the strategic fund, which does the incentive disbursement for it. So that money is going toward getting, and so it's really is getting it ready to turn over to Ford. So directly to them, it's spent on their behalf. And what that would send is that that this project will continue. They are in the middle of and the to the other two to try to find an agreement to that place. And so this is a negotiating technique. Received some harsh criticism, as you might imagine, from Sean Fain, the president of the the union, with job losses before it's even. But nevertheless, on the site prep, and that, to me, I take as a communication confidence that that the project.
All right, one last official ownership, and we began a year or so ago. The laws changed, and we're close to when they're about this issue, and let us know how members.
That your bank or credit union used to be, you will be responsible to do. Communicating into the federal government of involved in money laundering,